4 months of peace is a long time in Jaewon's world, long enough to feel dangerous. Things had settled into something that almost looked normal. If you squinted and ignored the armed driver, the background checks on every new employee, and the fact that my boyfriend could silence a room of 30 people by simply walking into it. Yes, boyfriend. That word still felt new in my mouth, like a shoe that fit perfectly, but you kept checking anyway. Jaehyun was healing slowly, in the quiet, determined way of someone who had survived something they hadn't fully named yet. Thursdays in the studio, longer sentences each week, small laughs returning like birds after winter. Work was good. My project portfolio had expanded into territory that made the executive team take me seriously in a way that had nothing to do with Jaewon's name. I had built something real here, in this city, in this life, which is exactly why, on a gray Tuesday morning, when I arrived at the office and found a plain white envelope on my desk with no return address and a single photograph inside, my stomach dropped completely. The photo was of me and Jaewon at the Mangwon market. On the back, in neat handwriting, "We know what he's protecting now." I didn't tell Jaewon immediately. I know how that sounds, but I needed 20 minutes to think clearly before walking into a conversation that would change the temperature of everything around us. I sat in the bathroom on the 14th floor, photo face down on the sink, and breathed. The syndicate we thought had been neutralized after Jaehyun's rescue apparently hadn't been, or something new had grown in the space the old one left behind. Either way, someone had been watching us long enough to feel comfortable sending a message, and the message wasn't a threat exactly, it was a reminder. We see her. We know she matters. We know where that puts her. When I walked into Jaewon's office 20 minutes later, he read my face before I said a word. He was already standing. I put the photograph on his desk. He looked at it for a long time. His hands were completely still, which I'd learned meant the opposite of calm. It meant the kind of control that costs something to maintain. "When?" he asked. "This morning. My desk." His jaw tightened. "Inside the building." "Yes." We looked at each other across the photograph. "This isn't over," I said. "No," he said quietly. "It isn't." His name was Oh Sung-tae. Jaewon told me that evening in the practice room. No music, just the two of us sitting on the floor against the mirror wall, the city glittering 30 floors below. Oh Sung-tae had been the financial architect behind the syndicate that took Jaehyun. When the rescue happened and the structure collapsed, most of the visible players went dark. But Sung-tae wasn't a visible player. He was the kind of man who existed 3 layers behind every decision, clean on paper, impossible to touch through normal channels. He hadn't made a move in 4 months because he was building something new. "He's not after the business," Jaewon said. "He's after leverage, something that actually hurts." "Me," I said. He didn't answer, which was its own answer. I stretched my legs out on the studio floor and stared at the ceiling. Okay. He looked at me. "I'm not leaving Seoul. I'm not quitting. I'm not hiding in an apartment while you handle everything alone again." I turned my head to look at him. "We already made a deal. No more hiding. That goes for danger too." He looked at me for a long moment. "Sprat, you're going to make this very complicated," he said. "That's what you get," I told him, "for falling for someone from Philly." Jaehyun knew Oh Sung-tae. That revelation came on a Thursday evening in the studio, when Jaewon carefully told his brother about the photograph, the name, the threat taking shape. Jaehyun sat cross-legged on the floor, very still, and listened with the expression of someone hearing a story they'd already lived from a different angle. "He was the one who approached me first," Jaehyun said, "before everything went wrong. He seemed like a businessman, legitimate. I didn't know what I was walking into until I was already inside." His voice was steady. His therapist had been helping him practice that steadiness over the shape of old memories. "He recruits people who have something worth losing," Jaehyun continued. "Then he makes sure they understand exactly how much they have to lose." He looked at me when he said that last part. I held his gaze. "I'm not going anywhere." Jaehyun studied me for a moment with the quiet, careful attention of someone who had learned to read rooms the hard way. Then he nodded slowly. "I know things about his operation. Details he doesn't know," I remembered. "I was supposed to be disposable. People like him talk freely around people they've already written off. He looked at his brother. I want to help end this. The plan took 2 weeks to build carefully. Jaehyun's information gave them something they hadn't had before: specifics, account structures, shell company names, the location of a server facility in Busan that held financial records connecting Sungtae to 17 different illegal operations across 4 countries. Jaewon's 2 most trusted men, Do-hyun and Sok, mapped the access points. Jaewon worked the legal angle simultaneously, feeding sanitized information to a prosecutor he'd had a quiet relationship with for years, the kind of relationship built on mutual usefulness and careful distance. My role was not the dangerous part. I want to be clear about that, because Jaewon was extremely clear about that. My role was the distraction. Oh, Sungtae's new operation had a corporate front, a consulting firm registered 3 months ago. They were actively recruiting, and I had exactly the professional profile they'd be interested in. A Black American woman with an impressive resume, working at Kang Jaewon's company, recently visible at public locations. I was, from Sungtae's perspective, a perfect pressure point, so we decided to let him think he was pressing it. You're using yourself as bait, Soo-yeon said flatly, when I gave her the minimal version of events. I prefer the word leverage, I said. She handed me an extra coffee. Come back in one piece. The meeting with Sungtae's recruiter happened on a Wednesday at a cafe in Gangnam. Her name was Miss Cho, polished, warm, the kind of professional warmth that has been calibrated to put people at ease and extract information without them noticing. She was good at her job. I recognized the technique because I'd been in enough boardrooms to know what skilled manipulation looked like when it was wearing a blazer. I was better at it. I let her lead. I asked interested questions. I shared just enough frustration about workplace dynamics to seem recruitable, not too much, which would seem desperate, but enough to seem reachable. 40 minutes in, she leaned forward slightly and said, "We've heard you've had some challenges with your current environment. Leadership can be complicated when the person at the top has a certain kind of reputation." There it was. She was probing for information about Jaewon, about weaknesses, about what I knew and whether I could be turned. I smiled at her pleasantly. Every workplace has its dynamics. I manage mine just fine. She smiled back. Underneath the table, my hand was steady. Do-hyun, sitting 2 tables away behind a newspaper, was recording everything. Sungtae made his move 4 days later. Not through Miss Cho, through someone inside Jaewon's company, a mid-level finance manager named Baek, who had been quietly feeding information for 6 weeks in exchange for debt relief on a private loan. Sungtae's shell company had engineered. We knew about Baek. We'd known for 10 days. We let him keep sending information. Carefully curated information that Jaewon and Do-hyun had constructed specifically for Sungtae to receive. Details that would make him feel confident. Details that were designed to move him. And move him they did. Sungtae called a meeting with 3 of his senior people in a private room above a restaurant in Itaewon. He believed the room was clean. He'd had it swept 2 days earlier. He hadn't accounted for the ventilation panel that Seok had accessed the night before. The recording was 4 hours long. By hour 2, Sungtae had personally referenced 3 separate operations by name, 2 of which were on the prosecutor's active investigation list. By the time Jaewon forwarded the recording through the correct channels, the legal case had gone from circumstantial to airtight in one evening. It wasn't a dramatic confrontation. It was paperwork and patience. That, Jaewon told me quietly, was how you actually won. Sungtae was arrested on a Friday morning. I found out via text from Jaewon at 7:52 a.m. Done. I was standing in the kitchen of my apartment making coffee, still in my pajamas, and I sat down on the kitchen floor because my legs simply decided that was enough standing for the moment. Soo-yeon called 11 minutes later. Somehow she already knew. She had a network of information sources I'd stopped trying to fully understand. "Are you okay?" she asked. "I'm sitting on my kitchen floor," I said. "That tracks," she said. "I'll bring pastries." She arrived with pastries and also Jaehyun, which I hadn't expected. He stood in my doorway holding a paper bag with the careful, slightly formal energy of someone who was still learning how to show up for people after years of being alone. Jaewon is in meetings all morning, he said. He said to check on you. I'm fine, I said. I know. He held up the bag. We brought red bean. I let them in. We sat around my small kitchen table, me, Jaehyun, and Soo-yeon, eating pastries in the particular warm silence of people who had been through something together and come out the other side. It felt, very simply, like belonging. Jaewon arrived at my apartment at 7 that evening. He looked tired in the specific way of someone who'd been precise and controlled for 16 hours and was finally somewhere he didn't have to be either of those things. I handed him the leftover coffee. He sat on my couch and didn't say anything for a while. I sat beside him. It's done, he finally said. The legal process will take time. It always does. But he can't move. He can't reach anyone. It's done. How do you feel? I asked. He thought about it genuinely, which was something he'd gotten better at over the past months. Not deflecting the question, actually checking. Like something I've been carrying for a very long time, he said, just got significantly lighter. I leaned my head against his shoulder. Your brother helped end the thing that took him, I said. That's not nothing. That's actually everything. He was quiet for a moment. He wants to compete again, Jaewon said. Dance competitions. He looked up circuits last week, showed me the registration page. Something warm expanded in my chest. And you, I asked. He turned to, look at me. I want to compete too, he said simply. I smiled at him. He smiled back, that rare, real, unguarded smile that still rearranged things in me every time. The competition was held on a Saturday evening in a theater in Hongdae. Not corporate, not polished. A real independent showcase, the kind where the audience sat on folding chairs and the energy in the room was electric because everyone there loved this and nothing else mattered. Jaehyun performed first. His piece was quiet and searching and honest, the kind of dancing that tells a story without a single word. The audience felt it. I felt it. By the end, the woman beside me was wiping her eyes and didn't look embarrassed about it. Then Jaewon walked out. The audience didn't recognize him immediately. He was in all black, hair slightly undone, entirely present in a way that made the title and the reputation fall away completely. He danced like someone who had spent years in a locked room and finally opened the door all the way. The footwork, the groove through his shoulders, the moment where he stopped managing the movement and simply became it. I was in the 4th row, completely still, heart doing something that had no professional vocabulary. When it ended, the room came apart. I stood and clapped in a way that would have embarrassed any reasonable person. I was not, in that moment, a reasonable person. I was just someone watching the man she loved finally choose himself. Backstage afterward, the brothers stood together for a long moment. I watched from across the room as Jaewon said something to Jaehyun that I couldn't hear. Jaehyun nodded, looked at the floor, looked back up. Then he hugged his brother, quick, firm, the hug of two people who had almost lost each other and were still learning to say what they meant. Jaewon's hand came up and held the back of his brother's head for just a second. I turned away to give them privacy and found Soo-yeon at my elbow, who had come with a small group from the office. I didn't know, she said quietly, watching them. Neither did he, I said, for a long time. She looked at me sideways. You figured it out, though. I walked in on him dancing, I said. After that, the rest was pretty obvious. She shook her head, smiling. Only you, Michael. My name, in her voice, sounded like home. This city had done that. Taken a girl from Philly who had landed here on talent and nerve and a glitching keycard and quietly, stubbornly become the place she belonged. Not because it was easy, because she had chosen to stay inside the difficulty and build something real. 3 months later, the bookshelf was still moved. The studio door was still open. Music still leaked into the hallway on Tuesday and Thursday evenings, and sometimes on Sunday mornings when neither of us had anywhere urgent to be. Jaehyun was registered for a regional competition in March. He practiced with focus and the particular seriousness of someone rediscovering a language they'd thought they'd forgotten. Baek, the finance manager who had fed information to Sungtae, had been quietly dismissed and was cooperating with prosecutors in exchange for reduced charges. The legal process was long and not dramatic, mostly documents and depositions and carefully worded statements. Jaewon was different now. Not soft, not without edges, but the edges were his own, chosen, not inherited from grief and necessity. He had dinner with his mother twice a month. He slept better. He laughed more readily, and when he laughed, he didn't look faintly annoyed at himself afterward. On a Sunday morning in late winter, sitting across from each other in his kitchen with cold coffee and the quiet of a city still waking up, he looked at me for a long moment and said, "I've been thinking about what comes next." "What did you decide?" I asked. "That I want you in it," he said. "All of it, whatever that looks like." I looked at him across the table. "Deal," I said. "Seoul in spring is something else. Cherry blossoms along the Han River, light that comes in golden and generous. The city's constant noise softened slightly, like even the traffic remembered to breathe. Jaewon and I walked through Yeouido on a Saturday morning. No particular destination, just moving through the bloom-lined paths with the easy rhythm of people who had stopped needing to fill silence. A little girl pointed at the flowers and said something to her grandmother in Korean that made the old woman laugh. She said they looked like clouds that fell down, Jaewon translated. "She's not wrong," I said. He took my hand. I thought about Philadelphia, the October light on South Street, my mother's voice on FaceTime asking if I was eating enough, the specific ache of loving a place while being built by another one. I still missed it. I probably always would. That was allowed. But I looked at this man beside me, the one who had locked a door when he should have called security, who had slid a key card across a table like a question, who had stood in a practice room and pressed play and said, "Don't just watch," and understood completely why I had stayed. Some choices look like accidents from the outside. From the inside, they're the most deliberate thing you've ever done. Jaehyun won his regional competition. Not first place, second. He came off stage grinning in a way I hadn't seen from him before, bright and slightly stunned, like the moment was larger than he'd prepared for. Jaewon was in the front row. He stood when Jaehyun took his bow. I have a photo of that moment. Jaewon standing, clapping, looking at his brother with an expression that is the most unguarded thing I have ever seen on his face. Full and unmanaged and completely real. I keep it on my phone. I look at it sometimes when the world feels complicated, and it resets something in me every time. The brothers went out for some gyupsal afterward, the four of us, with Soo-yeon and Do-hyun making it 6. The restaurant was loud and warm. Someone ordered too much. Do-hyun told a story about a business trip that was either deeply alarming or extremely funny, and somehow it was both. Jaewon ate too much meat and looked satisfied about it. Jaehyun laughed at something I said about Philly summers and then asked 3 follow-up questions like he was genuinely building a picture. This, I thought, looking around the table. This is what the other side of survival looks like. Not the absence of difficulty, just people, choosing each other in the middle of it. 1 year after a glitching keycard took me to the wrong floor. The studio door was open. Music was playing, something with a bass line that lived in your chest. Familiar now the way all the best things become familiar. Jaehyun was at the bar, working through a sequence. Jaewon was in the center of the room, moving through something new. A piece he'd been building for 3 weeks, slow and deliberate, the kind of choreography that meant something specific to the person making it. I was cross-legged against the mirror wall, locks loose, coffee going cold beside me, watching. This was a Tuesday evening. This was just our life. He finished the section, turned, and held out his hand. I took it without hesitating. We moved together, unmatched in technique, completely matched in everything else. His precision and my feeling, and the particular chemistry of 2 people who had chosen each other through difficult things and come out still choosing. Jaehyun pretended not to watch. He was absolutely watching. Outside, Seoul was enormous and indifferent and beautiful. Inside, nothing was hidden anymore. That's the thing about finally letting someone see you. It doesn't just change you, it changes what's possible. It makes space for other people to stop hiding too, like permission passed from one person to the next until the whole room is breathing differently. We didn't become new people. We became more fully the ones we already were. That's the real story. That was always the real story.